Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 Clean Fuel Summit presented by Louisiana Clean Fuels and the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership. My name is Scott Barrios. I am the president of the board of Louisiana Clean Fuels, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today for these webinars. The purpose of these webinars is to bring various stakeholders together to talk about how we look at clean fuel transportation in our state and develop the solutions to help with those. So we have an exciting 2-day virtual webinar today, and next year we'll be going back to an in-person version of this as well too. But I'm excited to hear today, because now is not a better time than ever to talk about these topics and develop plans for this. It's the people who are joining us for this webinar over the next few days, and the great lineups who are going to work together to find the solutions for the state. So with that, I would like to introduce our Executive Director of Louisiana Clean Fuels, Ms. Ann Vale, who can talk us through what we have going on. Ann, please take it away.
Thank you, Scott. First, we want to thank our sponsors. We really appreciate you. So Entergy and AmeriGas are our corporate sponsors, both of which are also Louisiana Clean Fuels supporting members. And FuelsFix, which is a fantastic publication we'd love for you to check out at fuelsfix.com. They are our supporting sponsor. Thank you all so much for your support. All right, so to kick it off today, you are at the 2022 Virtual Clean Fuels Summit opening session. This is your basic clean fuels update from both of your Clean Cities coalitions, Louisiana Clean Fuels and the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership. We're going to be talking today about our coalitions, our activities, what we're doing, and a little bit about the landscape of fleet fuel adoption and some upcoming events and things that you're going to be interested in. So let's get started. All right, so today your speakers are us. So it's myself, Ann, the Executive Director of Louisiana Clean Fuels. We have Tom, who is the Director of the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership, and Tyler, who is my right hand, Project Manager at Louisiana Clean Fuels and our technical guy. All right, so let's get going. There you go, Tyler.
Good morning, everybody. As Ann mentioned, I'm the project manager at Louisiana Clean Fuels. I want to give a little bit of background about Clean Cities as a whole. We are both Clean Cities coalitions, the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership and Louisiana Clean Fuels. So a little bit of background about what that even means. Clean Cities is a Department of Energy initiative that is really designed to build partnerships to advance affordable domestic transportation fuels and technologies. We do this primarily through supporting alternative fuel vehicles, but as well as efficiency measures such as idle reduction and that sort of stuff that we'll talk about later on and as the summit goes on. So we serve as kind of a forum for local stakeholders on the ground across the entire country to help them connect with people that they need to work with to kind of get to the solutions that they want to save money and to reduce emissions. And we are a collection of coalitions across the entire country to provide that really grassroots support, as opposed to being one kind of national thing that comes in and swoops in and pretends to understand the local landscape better than the people who live there. We know it because we were here. So that's kind of why we're this kind of network of coalitions across the country. You can go to the next slide. We came out of a series of laws listed here that are all too boring to go into very deeply, but from the mid-70s to the early 90s, this series of laws basically created Clean Cities, as well as some other resources that we use daily. The fueleconomy.gov and Fuel Economy Guide has been incredibly useful for getting this information in front of consumers buying vehicles and understanding how that's going to impact their fuel cost and that sort of stuff over the life of the vehicle. The Alternative Fuel Data Center, which is an absolutely incredible resource for everything alternative fuels and fuel economy and fuel efficiency, and then Clean Cities itself in 1992. So we've been around for a hot minute now. You know? So I mentioned this already, we really kind of fit in with DOE under this technology integration standpoint among this other group of 4 different key pillars under the Vehicle Technologies Office where we sit. We have a whole arm for batteries electrification, material technologies, energy efficient mobility systems, which is a lot of ride share and public transit and autonomous vehicles, and then advanced engine and fuel research. It's really fundamental research about engines and using these combustible fuels as well as the electrification stuff to get energy efficiency where needed. But we sit under technology integration. We're trying to get everything actually in consumers' hands and get these vehicles on the road and driving. So the kind of 4, that's fine. So yeah, we do all this for efficiency and for cost savings and emissions reductions. Our portfolio spans the entire gamut. We work with light, medium, heavy-duty vehicles. We work with alternative fuels, renewable fuels. We work on the infrastructure side of things. And then some of the softer technologies like idle reduction, simply turning off engines will save fuel, save emissions, fuel economy improvements like driver training, route optimization, those sorts of things. And then some of the new stuff coming online like autonomous vehicles, kind of as those emerge, we'll be working more directly with those as well. So I mentioned we're this national collection of coalitions across the entire country. There are more than 75 active coalitions across the nation. We are just 2 of them represented today that cover the entire state of Louisiana. We'll show those territories a little bit later on. But our coalition territories cover over 80% of the US population. And then on top of that, while we have territories, we're not territorial, like we don't compete with each other. We work in each other's territories all the time. We work outside of our territories if there's no Clean Cities Coalition to support you. So anywhere you are across the country, you can reach out to your nearest coalition and we will help you any way we can. So we do this work through a lot of methods. We work with alternative fuel vehicles, and some of that comes from just connecting fleets with the fuel providers to kind of build those relationships and figure out what can work for a given fleet in their exact situation, but also offering some training and information. We do a lot of first responder safety training to make sure that these vehicles are deployed safely. We do a lot of the training on the kind of cost analysis and understanding what goes into an alternative fuel vehicle project. We provide deep technical assistance in partnership with the national labs to actually solve any problems that come up mechanically or otherwise with these vehicles, identifying funding, just general public outreach and recognition, and then collecting data and tracking the progress, which we'll talk a little bit about how we collect that data and what we do with that later on as well. And then to move a little bit towards what Louisiana is doing in particular, and then Louisiana Clean Fuels as a coalition, we have been around for over 20 years. We can legally drink now, which is quite exciting. And this is our territory here. Louisiana Clean Fuels covers the majority of the state geographically, except for the little New Orleans cutout that you'll hear from Tom to talk about later on today. And then this great quote from Anne that we keep in all of our presentations, because it's wonderful, is it is our job to identify and then work to remove the barriers that prevent both public and private fleets from adopting alternative fuel vehicles and advanced technologies into their fleets, which is exactly what we do. We remove those barriers. And we do this through the support of our members. We can't do it alone, especially because we're a nonprofit. We need funding. So all these partners that you see here have been with us for quite a while, and it's really great to have their support, and that helps us do the great work that we do. And I think many of them are represented in the audience today. So thank you all very much for the support over the years. So I mentioned the Alternative Fuel Data Center earlier. We call it the AFDC. It is a wonderful tool, and one of the great things that it provides is the station locator, which is the single resource that Google Maps, PlugShare, ChargePoint, all those use. They're really closely partnership, but this will show the alternative fueling infrastructure across the state, across the country, and actually Canada as well. And you can see that we've got maybe more infrastructure than many people might expect here in Louisiana. Now we've kept in kind of last year's numbers on the right there. So you can see that most of the fuel types have increased in the number of stations across the state. Some of them have decreased very slightly, like biodiesel. That's actually the only one. And that's just kind of the way that things go sometimes. But for the most part, we're actually increasing over time pretty dramatically. And it's been really fun to track over the years. Going?
Yep, hold on.
And then I mentioned some data stuff. So we do collect data from our fleets that we work with over the years. And this kind of allows us to understand what's happening in terms of alternative fuels in the state, but also our effectiveness as a Clean Cities Coalition. So the 2 metrics that we tend to use in Clean Cities is the gallons of gasoline equivalent reduced. So how many basically gallons of petroleum are we not using by using alternative fuels to use these domestic sources like natural gas, propane, electric vehicles. And that's what's represented here. And there is a pretty big jump around the 2013 time period, and that's when we expanded to cover the rest of the state. We were just a small section of parishes around the greater Baton Rouge area before, and we expanded, and with that comes new stakeholders, new projects, and that's kind of why we get that really big rise at the beginning. And then it continued to rise through that, mostly through actually new projects, not just reporting glitches and reporting fidelity, although that does play a role. But you can kind of see the breakdown here, and we'll go to some pie charts in a minute as well, so you can see how it actually shakes down individually. And then our greenhouse gas emissions reductions. This one, there's a lot of stuff to dive into here, which we won't spend the time on today, but this is a really, really interesting chart. But you can see that it has been kind of increasing over time. And a lot of the big differences here are really from the ways that we've calculated greenhouse gas emissions reductions and how we better understand where these emissions are coming from and kind of get a better, more realistic estimate of emissions. So that's changed over time, as well as just reporting stuff. Whenever fleets don't give us all the data year over year, that makes it harder to track, and that's reflected in the data. But it is still really interesting to look at. And this is a really great pie chart here, because this isn't just the fuel types. This is all the efforts that we work on. So we do work kind of primarily on alternative fuel vehicles, because that's where a lot of the uncertainty is and where the education is needed. But that only makes up 41% of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions in our territory. 36% is just from idle reduction. That's just from fleets turning their engines off or having automatic engine stop technologies on their vehicles. That's a huge amount of savings just from that. And every ton of greenhouse gas emissions reductions there is because of reducing fuel usage, and that's money saved. Also, fuel economy improvements down there as well. A lot of that's from driver training. These are kind of simple things to get involved with for a fleet, and that's one of the reasons that if you're a fleet and I've spoken to you before, you know that I've talked about this a lot, because it's really effective. And then you can see some of the other stuff that's shaken down too. Electric vehicles becoming more important over time. Off-road vehicles become more important over time. All these sorts of things have kind of changed over the years. And then this is just the alternative fuel projects to look at basically the same sort of pie chart. This one is gallons of gasoline reduced. So this is petroleum reductions. You can see the vast majority in Louisiana and our territory has been from CNG. This has been true for the last 2 decades of our existence. But we have some other stuff coming on, or that have been a big portion of that as well, like propane, renewable natural gas, biodiesel. And then every year, the electric's getting kind of a bigger and bigger portion of that as well, as we've gotten a lot of trends at moving towards electrification. Can you go to the next slide? And then this is the greenhouse gas emissions reductions, again, by fuel type. And you can see that it's kind of interesting that some fuels are more effective at reducing greenhouse gas emissions reductions, particularly the renewable fuels like renewable natural gas, which we have in St. Landry Parish, and then biodiesel, which we produce a lot of here in Louisiana. And when it's used, it's really, really effective at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then you can also see the electric down at the bottom, 2.7%. It's only 0.4% of our petroleum reductions, but it's 2.7% of our greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And that's because we have a relatively clean electric grid here in Louisiana, and that contributes pretty aggressively towards that. So kind of interesting to look at those numbers. And I think that's over to you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. So we're moving into a little bit more about our events and some of our projects for the year, and looking back at some of the earlier events that we've had this year. Because of COVID, we celebrated our Clean Fuel Leader Awards for 2020 data at the beginning of this year. We're going to host another Clean Fuel Leader Awards in the fall, which is when we normally have it, to honor the fleets for their 2021 data, which is the preliminary results that you just saw that Tyler described to you. So because we never got to tell you all the wonderful fleets from 2020 and what they did, we wanted to go over very quickly some of our clean fuel champions that we awarded at the beginning of this year. So Waste Management was our clean fuel champion with overall GGE reductions and alternative fuel use. They were pretty much the top ranking fleet in almost every category. So our top CNG fleet, again, was Waste Management. That is the primary fuel that they use for their fleet. The climate MVP was Republic Services, because they employ a whole bunch of other practices such as idle reduction and such for their fleet. So their climate MVP, their greenhouse gas reductions were incredible this last chunk. And the most efficient fleet, again, was Republic Services for utilizing various methods to reduce their emissions. The top performing school district was East Baton Rouge Parish, and they have a propane fleet. And they're starting to look at electric, but they're predominantly propane right now, and just going gangbusters using that fuel. The top on-road idle reduction fleet is AmeriGas. So not only do they sell and ship and move propane around to our fleets around the state, their fleet is extremely efficient and very aggressive idle reduction policies. So hats off to you guys. And our top propane fleet, the top user of propane in the state, is United Parcel Service, another one of our members. And the top EV fleet for electric vehicles is Sportran. It is a transit system up in Shreveport that has electric transit buses. But the fastest growing electric vehicle fleet is our very own here in Baton Rouge, Capital Area Transit System, which keeps adding new electric vehicles every chance they get. And they're trying their best to catch up and with Sportran, and we got a friendly competition going between the two. So hats off to you all. We're really excited to see your progress and looking forward to see who we can honor in the fall. Tyler?
And then in addition to these, the kind of annual awards that we like to give out, we also have a Green Fleets program in the state. So many of you may know this from a few years ago, but we have merged the Green Fleets program with the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership to make it a statewide program that represents fleets across the entire state. And if you give us a little bit extra data than what we asked for in the annual report, we will kind of certify your fleet as being a 1 to 5 star fleet for all of your alternative fuel vehicle efforts, your emissions reductions efforts, your idle reduction, all that sort of stuff, and kind of try to give you a bit of a score, so to speak, so that you can represent exactly how well you've been doing at all these efforts and give that recognition out, but also give you practical advice on what to do next and how you can get your score even higher as a way of gamifying alternative fuel vehicles, but also recognizing the great efforts that you put out there. So if you're interested in that program, reach out. We'd love to chat and we'd love to get some fleet data and work with you.
Thank you. So some of the other great events that we had this year was our Clean Transportation Awareness Week. This is the first time we've had such an initiative. And in partnership with the DOTD, we held a vehicle expo. All vehicle types were invited, but it turned out that we ended up getting all electric, medium, and heavy duty vehicles and a few light duty vehicles. And it turned into an electric vehicle expo, and it was a really exciting day. We also spent about 2 weeks with an education outreach campaign for our legislators, sending them information about all the alternative fuels and about the events and inviting them to them. We spent a day at the Capitol in the Rotunda, and we had a fantastic reception at the Basin to kick off all these events, and finished up with the expo and a press conference with the governor and DOTD Secretary Sean Wilson. So if you would like to view those, the press conference and the interviews, they are on YouTube. They're not on our YouTube channel, but we have the links here. And this is a list of the vehicles that we had that day. So it was really exciting to have some vehicles on display that have really never been in a fleet operation in Louisiana yet. So many of these vehicles were just brand new to us. And we invite you to check this out, look at the YouTube videos and see what the day was all about. So it was a really, really great show. And again, we're talking about YouTube. So we have our own YouTube channel as well. And this webinar and others, we record them and we post them on our YouTube channel so that if you miss it, you can come back and you can watch it. Or if you want to share it with someone, you can find them here. So all of our past webinars and including our virtual site visit with the Capital Area Transit System. And again, past webinars and past Clean Fuel Summits. All right, getting into our cooperative agreements and contracts. This is the meat and potatoes of what we do and the projects that we enact up in every year. Excuse me. So our Department of Energy deliverables each year, we get to select and add to that. This year, we've selected listening sessions. So we're going to be doing some research to figure out what some barriers to adoption are in certain case studies and use cases. We're working on that right now, but we believe we're going to be delving into biofuels as one of our listening sessions. 3.2 is state-run funding programs. That is your NEVI program, your Volkswagen settlements, anything that your state is putting out as a funding program or is managing as a funding program. 3.3 is alternative fuel corridors, which Tyler will speak about soon. And that is nominating our corridors under the Federal Highway Administration's program. So any activities that contribute to nominating and getting these corridors completed, that is activities that we will conduct under this agreement. And we also additional outreach events, education, outreach, things like this webinar here, and technical assistance and fleet coaching. So if there is any particular fleets out there who would like really in-depth hand-holding and fleet coaching, give us a call. We're happy to help you. We are not going to charge you because this is part of our deliverables for the Department of Energy. We also have a support contract with the Department of Natural Resources. That's also where our offices are, down in downtown Baton Rouge. So we do 12 outreach events annually. We publish a newsletter. We host either 3 regional meetings or 1 statewide meeting, which this is a statewide meeting. We maintain a social media presence and website. So their contract is all about outreach and education. And we also have a new contract with the Department of Transportation and Development. So we will be assisting them, or we have been assisting them with the alternative fuel corridors in the state, with nominating electric and hydrogen corridors, as we already have nominated propane, actually complete propane and natural gas corridors. We're trying to get electric and hydrogen to catch up with the other fuels. And we're also working on the state EV plan, which has been published for draft. A draft has been published for comment, and we'll be sharing a little more information about that later. And we'll also be helping the DOTD convert their fleet to alternative fuels. So that is all part of our support contract with the DOTD. We have a couple of grants that we've also won. This one we've been working on for about 2 years, Drive for EVs in the USA, or Drive Electric Louisiana and Drive Electric USA. Drive Electric USA is the main page for all of the original 14 states who won this grant. And we each have our own Drive Electric websites to conduct outreach to individuals, to fleets, to educate pretty much anyone in the state who will stop and listen and educate them about alternative fuels, specifically electric vehicles. So it's to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. We host a lot of ride and drives and showcase events, and we have a dealership program where we're helping people to understand where they can find an electric vehicle and help those dealers get their vehicles out in front of the public. So there's a lot of great things going on. Take a look at our webpage and join some of our events. The newest grant that we won is called Empower. It is all about workplace charging. Now, there is no funding for a workplace to get a charger. This grant is about developing the materials, the resources, the website, and the interface in which we can go out and to encourage businesses to deploy workplace charging. So that's where the funding is going. And the funding is also going to those coalitions who actually, when we utilize these materials, when we get commitments and we convince workplaces to do this and to add chargers for their employees, then we also get reimbursed for that as well. So we are one of 3 awards nationally, and all 3 groups that were awarded will be working together for this common goal. And we've kind of divvied up the tasks, but we are under the Empower team, which has over 32 Clean Cities coalitions working together to meet with workplaces and to develop these materials. So it's an exciting project, and we're really looking forward to getting started on that one. We have a lot of fun upcoming events. We're going to be at Slammed and Cammed at the River Center. We're going to be there with one of our local dealerships, and we're going to be talking about electric vehicles. We're going to be exhibiting at the Chief of Police annual conference. We're going to be presenting at the Louisiana Oil Marketers and C-Store Association annual convention. In the fall, we're going to have a Clean Fuel Leader Awards. In the spring, we're going to have a National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Expo for grant applicants. It's to help the grant applicants for the NEVI program. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more in the future as well. So anyone wanting to apply to the state DOT for the funding, we're going to have an expo that's going to help walk you through the process, give you tips, and introduce you to a lot of the project partners that you're going to have. So that event is in development. Our National Drive Electric Week event is October 1st. That is a typo. Sorry about that. October 1st at the Tanger Outlet Mall. And we have announced the dates of our next Clean Fuel Classic Golf Tournament and Clean Fuel Summit. And with that, I'm going to pitch you over to Tom, who is the director of the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership, for his update.
All right, thank you, Ann. Welcome everybody and good morning. Before I kick off, I wanted to thank Ann and Tyler for setting everything up and for putting all of this together, as well as Scott for kicking us off this morning. I know they've put a ton of work into this and it's going to be a really great couple of days. So thank you both. So as Ann mentioned, my name is Tom Hazley. In addition to being the director of the partnership, I'm also a principal planner at the Regional Planning Commission in New Orleans. So I wanted to today kind of go over how we've got a lot of changes coming up, and we've had a lot of changes recently. So I wanted to go over how we're kind of coordinating our different agency roles and looking towards kind of a new future for our partnership. So Ann, if you could go to the next slide. So if you aren't familiar with the RPC, we were formed in 1971. We serve the 8 parishes in and around New Orleans for about 1.3 million people. We have a board of 41 elected officials and citizen members, and we have a staff of about 20 people. That's a pretty diverse range of professionals. We've got transportation planners and land use planners. We have people who are in environmental work and public health. We also have a great GIS department. So we're pretty multifaceted. And that's actually kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today with our work with the partnership. So next slide, please. So at the RPC, we serve multiple different roles. As a transportation agency, we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization designated under federal law. So we program all federal transportation funds that come into our 8 parish region. In other words, that means we plan how the money is going to be spent. And we do that primarily through our long-range metropolitan transportation plan and a shorter range transportation improvement program. I'll get into those in just a little bit. We're also the the designated economic development district for our region, which means that we get funding to do economic development work across the region, and we help bring in grants for workforce development and other type projects. We have several environmental programs, including a brownfield redevelopment program that we help assess brownfields across the region and get those redeveloped and back into commerce. We, of course, have our Clean Fuels Partnership, which we'll be talking about today. And we're also the designated Louisiana Watershed Initiative fiscal agent, which it's a fairly new program led by the state using HUD funding that we are hoping to do some watershed level planning all across the region to reduce flood risk for our citizens. And then we also do whatever our bosses tell us to do and whatever the state and the federal guidance comes out to tell us to do. So next slide, please. So as Tyler mentioned earlier, Ann and Tyler, their coalition kind of takes care of the rest of the state, and our RPC region is the 8 parishes in and around New Orleans. So North Shore and South Shore. Within the transportation planning realm, that means we serve the New Orleans urbanized area, the Slidell urbanized area, Mandeville, Covington, and then the South Tangipahoa area. That's essentially where we can spend our transportation funds. But we can go on to the next slide. So again, the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuels Partnership is housed within the RPC. We've been here since 2008 with the goal of facilitating the expansion of cleaner transportation options into fleets and to reduce traditional fuel consumption and emissions. Since we were founded, we've built a stakeholder base of about 400 different individuals and groups. And we've also received funding from, in addition to DOE, the Louisiana Department of Natural Resources, the National Biodiesel Board, which I'm just now realizing I spelled incorrectly. That's embarrassing, but we've gotten funds from the CMAQ program, the EPA Clean Diesel program, and several other partners from both government and private entities. So next slide, please. So we have recently had a lot of changes in the type of work that we're doing and what we are doing. We've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes, assisting Ann and Tyler with their work, especially with the alternative fuel corridor nominations. And we're very excited to see where that goes. And we hope to continue working with them on the NEVI program at the state level. So again, we're really excited about that. But I wanted to particularly highlight one of our more recent deliverables, which we published in January of this year and which is available to everyone on our website. This is the Southeast Louisiana EV Readiness Guide. It was primarily created by my colleague, Maren Stevens, who I believe is on this call, on this meeting right now. And she did a great job of collecting information specific to our region about EVs and EVSE, and then tying that to local data. So demographics, land use, and travel considerations. And then we have created a guide essentially for local governments to use, outlining the challenges and best practices for implementing EVs across the region, both for private citizen use in terms of installing infrastructure, charging infrastructure, but also for fleet conversion. So this is really intended for local decision makers, whether that be elected officials or in planning departments, DPWs, what have you. And as I said, it's available to you now. If you are one of those groups, please go ahead and check it out. It is a very valuable resource. And we also created a companion mapping tool that is also available on our website, where you can look at existing EV charging stations, as well as many of those demographics that I mentioned before, things like employment and population, things like that, to help you start to decide where you might want to add more charging infrastructure. So moving forward, as I said, we've got a lot of changes coming up. Number one, we're hiring. I am the director now, but we are actually ready to bring on somebody new who can take this and bring this program kind of into its next phase. So we are looking forward to bringing on somebody very soon who can do that, and we're kind of opening up that process right now. But regardless of who is here, we do know that we have established an EV roundtable, which is kind of a follow-on from that EV guide. And what that will do is provide a forum for local entities to share best practices, to share their challenges, to learn from each other, and for us to bring in experts to help inform them about what they can do to, again, expand EV usage across our region, whether that means fleet conversions, purchasing vehicles, or installing infrastructure. We also plan to devote a lot of time and effort into assisting our local and state agencies with the implementation of the bill, or IJA, depending on who you're talking to. So as I said before, that means working on the NEVI program, especially with the upcoming plans that Ann is helping the state to work on for the formula program, but also with the discretionary grants that we hope we'll be hearing about soon. We plan to work with our local entities to help them go through that grant process. We're also particularly interested in the carbon reduction program, and we're looking into how that funding can tie into the work of the Clean Fuel Partnership, as well as many of the sector-specific programs that are available for transit agencies, school buses, etc. We're also hoping to coordinate with the state for the multi-state hydrogen hub that was announced back in March. We're still learning about that, but that is a partnership that we're very excited about, and we hope to use our resources here to tie into that program. And then we're starting to work with the Port of New Orleans on some emissions analyses. We're just now kicking that off, and we're excited about that one because we think it can serve as a pilot. If we can do some analyses with the port, perhaps we can then tie that into work for their tenants, to other ports that we have in our region, and to other similar entities. So next slide, please. So in addition to everything I just said, one of the things that I'm most excited about right now is tying in our Clean Cities work with our other RPC programs. We've had our Clean Fuel Partnership for many years now, since 2008. And I think we are at a point where, rather than having it as a standalone program, we're really going to try to integrate it into everything else the RPC does. As an agency, I mentioned all the different work we do. We serve as a facilitator among all of our local parishes and cities, the state, the federal agencies. And I think that, combining that great stakeholder group that we have with the Clean Fuel Partnership with our other program stakeholders, we can really learn about even more opportunities to create, to take advantage of. So as I mentioned, we are going to be doing that with the bill and IJA. As you probably know, MPOs have been given a great opportunity with that law and the funding that it provides, and then that goes beyond what may just be available for what we might think of as alternative fuel infrastructure. There's many programs that we think can help reduce emissions and advance the mission of this group. So we're hoping to tie that in. And then resilience planning. I know that's a major focus of these next few days. We will be, as an agency, creating a regional resilience improvement program or plan later this fall. And we will be creating a regional watershed plan this fall. So those two things will be tied together, but we very much see a role for alternative fuels in that. And that we see that, alternative fuels and reduced emissions are an integral part of improving resilience region-wide. We also, again, with our economic development program, we have some major grant applications out there under that program for hydrogen, and we're hoping to coordinate that with our Clean Fuel Partnership work. And then the last thing I wanted to get into was our Metropolitan Transportation Plan and our overall transportation planning program, which is something that we have been working on very diligently and we're almost done with. So, Anne, if you could go to the next slide. So the Metropolitan Transportation Plan 2052 is our primary planning document as an MPO. So actually separate from our Clean Fuel Partnership work. And we're almost done with that plan. It's a 30-year plan, so hence the 2052. We update it every 4 to 5 years, and the new draft should be ready for public comment by July 8th. We hope to have it approved and finalized by August 9th. So within that plan, obviously it talks about many things that may not be directly related to the Clean Fuel Partnership, but it has a very strong focus on many of the same priorities. So you see on the right of this slide here, the actual priorities of the plan listed out. I would say that sustainability and resilience, equity, economic opportunity, those are all very closely tied to our work with the Clean Fuel Partnership. And under that, this plan, it has a strong focus on improving alternative modes, walking, biking, public transit, as well as reducing vehicle miles traveled, whether that be in a single occupant vehicle or by encouraging people again to take an alternative mode. And thinking back about those slides Tyler was presenting earlier, we know those are two really great ways to reduce emissions. And then we are including in the plan encouraging alternative fuels as a function of the MPO, not simply as a function of the Clean Fuel Partnership, but as an MPO, this is something that we want to do. So again, tying together our different roles. And then our MTP does specifically direct our agency to coordinate its transportation planning activities with Clean Fuel Partnership activities. And that sounds like a small thing, and but it's really not, because this is our primary planning document. It is federally required. It is approved by our board to be kind of our guiding operational document over the next 4 to 5 years. So, we're making sure that we put in there that all of our transportation work should be tied in closely with our clean fuel partnership work. And again, that's something that I'm really excited about. And I think it's even though the partnership has been around for a while, you know, we have never taken such direct steps to make sure that everything is tied in closely together. And I think, you know, leveraging those resources that we have as an NPO can help the partnership become a lot stronger. But then the partnership can also introduce some new resources and new stakeholders to our transportation planning program. So we really are looking forward to how this is going to go. And I think that our region is going to see some great things moving forward. So with that, Anne, I think I've kind of wrapped up here, but you can see my contact information here. And I neglected to put my colleague Maren Stevens' contact information here, but you can contact me or her. You can find her information on our website, and we can certainly give you any information needed about our region, or we're happy to just talk if you'd like to. So,
Thank you, Tom.
you all.
They have been a fantastic help along with the Capital Region Planning Commission with our corridor nominations, and they're going to be an even more important resource when we start digging into our draft EV infrastructure plan that the DOTD has published for comment. So very important partners as the RPC and as the Clean Cities Coalition. So wanted to just really quickly cover the climate action plan. So, you know, Louisiana has a climate action plan. If you don't know this, the Climate Task Force recently published the plan. We are the first Gulf state to have a climate action plan, I believe. So congratulations to us. And if you're interested in learning more about it, I have the website down here. Or you can just type in Louisiana Governor Climate Action Plan and you'll find it. But we have our next climate task force meeting in July. So this is July 12th, and it will be at the state capitol at 9 a.m. It will be streaming on YouTube as all the meetings have been, and there's also an in-person option. But I wanted to call attention to some of the strategies underneath the plan that are specifically transportation oriented. So this doesn't have any legislative backing per se, but this is with the administration's goals. And we're working to try to find ways to implement each of these strategies that we can into actual action. So we want to accelerate the adoption and accessibility of low and zero emission vehicles and fuels by shifting our public fleets to low and zero emission vehicles. We want to expand the availability and reduce the socioeconomic and geographic barriers to low and zero emission passenger vehicles and supporting infrastructure. And in this section, Louisiana Clean Fuels is specifically mentioned as the kind of organization that the state should partner with. So Clean Cities coalitions like us, including the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership. And they want to implement targeted pilot projects to accelerate the transition of medium and heavy duty vehicles to low and zero emission vehicles. Again, there is no funding or any legislation backing any of this. These are goals that the state has published that they wish to achieve. Pilot projects, if you're interested in doing a pilot project, who you need to call is one of your Clean Cities Coalition. So if you're in Tom's territory, give them a call. We're going to know if there's existing funding out there, or if you want to partner on a grant program with us, we can help make those projects come true. So work with us and we'll see what we can do to get that idea from dream to reality. And strategy 10 is to reduce vehicle miles traveled and increase transportation efficiencies. Just like Tyler mentioned earlier, one of the most efficient ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and emissions overall is to just use less fuel. And by taking public transit or reducing your trips, idle reduction, those are great ways to reduce emissions. And the final strategy related to transportation and clean cities is increase in urban, rural, and regional public transit service. So all of these are very important. If you'd like to learn more, again, you can look at the task force website. Tyler, I'm going to pitch it to you for a VW update.
All right, so this wouldn't be a Clean Fuel Summit without talking about the VW settlement. despite how much I wish that we'd be past this, but here we are. The Volkswagen settlement, as many of you know, provided about $18.6 million to Louisiana to replace diesel vehicles and install electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And we're past all of it. It has all been allocated. There is no more funding available, just saying that right out front. But I think that we can learn a lot from what we have, what we've seen through the Volkswagen settlement in Louisiana, especially in advance of the infrastructure bill funding that's coming to our state, which we'll be talking about a little bit more today, and then definitely more tomorrow during a grant session. So the state was allowed to use up to 15% of the $18.6 million on electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And some of that did happen, about 12 to 13% of it got used for that, which is nice. But the state prioritized funding cleaner school buses, which makes a lot of sense. Kids have much faster metabolisms. They're much more affected by local air pollution than adults are. And we have a lot of very old diesel buses on the road in Louisiana. Very, very old diesel buses, maybe older than you might expect. And replacing those is kind of a high priority. So the state spent about $10.2 million on replacing school buses across the state in 16 different parishes. 117 of those buses, we're really happy to say, were propane buses. And then the other remaining 160 buses were diesel buses. And that was pretty directly through work that Louisiana Clean Fuels and Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership did on the Volkswagen settlements to get those buses on the road. We're really, really proud of that. About $6.6 million was dedicated to the Department of Transportation Development to replace a lot of their old diesel equipment, kind of across the entire state. So that is still being spent. I think they've spent about 2/3 of that at this point. So that's going through. The Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry is replacing some of their vehicles, largely off-road equipment and some heavy duty stuff, with about $700,000 of funding. The town of Hornbeck was awarded $75,000 to replace an old diesel truck with a newer CNG one that can basically provide fuel as like a fuel on a service thing, which is kind of interesting to support their CNG station there, so they can bring fuel up to a given vehicle if they need it, kind of an emergency. And then so far, about $2.1 million was dedicated to electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which is very close to the 2.4 million that we had available under the program. And that is going to 32 cities, towns, and universities to purchase around 63 dual port level 2 chargers across the state, and then 26 DC fast chargers for kind of interstate travel and longer road trips. And then 3 electric chargers to charge some transit buses, Southeastern University, I believe, and then up in Shreveport. So a pretty wide variety of stuff that was dedicated, and we saw more and more alternative fuel projects, electric vehicle projects proposed and actually applied for towards the end of the program, which I think tees up really nicely what we can expect with the infrastructure bill funds, getting a lot more interest in alternative fuels across the state. And so one of the things that really has become very important over the last year since the infrastructure bill was passed in November is the Alternative Fuel Corridor Program. And many of you may know about this program, but it's been a program for many years now to dedicate stretches of interstate across the country as being alternative fueling corridors for each fuel type. So we have compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, propane, electric vehicle, hydrogen. All those can get their own kind of corridor designations, and that allows you to put signage along the roads for public awareness and generally, but also more recently unlocks funding from the National Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Program. The next slide. So in Louisiana, I think Anne mentioned this earlier, we already had all of our interstates filled up with CNG infrastructure. They're all designated propane infrastructure. It's all designated as corridors. Previously, we didn't have anything for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So that's what you're looking at here. You see the dotted lines along the bottom of the Louisiana, I-10 and 12. Those were designated as pending, but we didn't have it across the rest of the state. And this is really important because the NEVI funds, about $5 billion, we'll talk about here in a second, can only be spent along designated corridors. So we kind of needed to designate the rest of the state if we wanted to equitably spread those funds across the state. So in partnership with the Department of Transportation, we have designated the rest of our interstate system here in Louisiana as being pending or planned corridors under the program for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So you can see those lines here. That is all of our interstates, the majority of the loops and spurs across the state as well to kind of serve the underserved areas, kind of urban areas, as well as a few stretches of highway down in South Louisiana, Highway 90, Highway 1 and Highway 3235. Those provide a lot of important access to our ports for heavy duty heavy-duty trucking, as well as they serve as evacuation routes, which is incredibly important for resiliency, which we're going to have a whole panel about tomorrow. So listen into that if you're interested. And all those dots on the map are kind of just proposed locations. Those are not actually planned stations necessarily, but those will feed into our state plan, which we'll talk more about later on.
And the round 6 corridor nominations have not been approved yet. So this is what we have submitted and requested, and we are waiting not so patiently for the results so we can know how that will affect our state EV plan.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Yes, this was submitted on May 13th, and we're still waiting on feedback from the Federal Highway Administration. So we also put in a nomination for hydrogen corridors across the state. There is no hydrogen fueling infrastructure in the state currently. This only exists in a couple of states at the moment, but Louisiana, in partnership with Texas and Oklahoma, did apply for the Atlas Hub hydrogen grant program federally, and to become a hydrogen hub in the country. So I think there'll be 3 hubs across the nation, and we are hoping to be one of them. And so in advance of that, we want to go ahead and get these corridors designated as planned corridors so that we can kind of chase any funds that come along the line and kind of get a head start on that. And again, these kind of dots and regions on a map are very these will satisfy the requirements. They are not planned stations as of right now. And this is kind of an unfunded program. So we're just hoping to get ahead of things at the moment. And then I mentioned the infrastructure. We've all mentioned the infrastructure bill many times, and I mentioned NEVI in particular many times today. So one of the things that came out of the infrastructure bill in November of last year is that there is $7.5 billion for electric vehicle and alternative fuel infrastructure. $5 billion of that is part of what's called the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, or NEVI. And that is $5 billion dedicated directly to DC fast charging along our interstates or along designated alternative fuel corridors for electrification. Now, Louisiana is getting about $73.4 million through this program. It's all separated or divvied out by a Federal Highway Administration or Department of Transportation formula to all the states. And we are getting about $10 million for the first year, and it'll ramp up to like $13 million per year for the next 4 years. And that can only be spent on these DC fast chargers on corridors, which is why we nominated everything earlier. And we'll hear again more about this tomorrow during our grant panel. And then there's $2.5 billion that is for all alternative fuels that is kind of further split down into 2 pots. We don't have much guidance on what that's going to look like yet, but that looks like it's not going to be dedicated solely to electric vehicles, but half of it can be used for propane and CNG hydrogen infrastructure. And then that can go off of the interstates as well, which is pretty exciting. So we're kind of anxiously awaiting what that's going to look like so that we can get some applicants going for that funding here in Louisiana.
Yeah, and that guidance should be coming out in the fall, I've heard. So, well, got a little bit of time yet. Got to get through this hot summer.
Yep. And part of this NEVI program is that states have to develop a state electric vehicle plan, electric vehicle charging plan. And that's going to be developed by the Department of Transportation in the states. Ours, of course, is Department of Transportation and Development. And Louisiana Clean Fuels is in the group to develop that plan, and a draft is already published. So the deadline on actually submitting the full plan to the FHWA is August 1st, but we have went ahead and published a draft on June 21st. There are links there, and I'll put a link in the chat as well so that y'all can go directly to the page. But you can look at our draft plan to kind of understand what the thinking is currently for charging infrastructure across the entire state, how we are kind of hoping to distribute these funds and hoping to build in evacuation routes and resiliency and equity concerns and everything into the actual plan so that whenever the funds do become available, we can make sure that we have a really good understanding of how we should distribute those across the state and make it really equitable and kind of get it everywhere. So some important links there. Again, I'll drop those into the chat. And the deadlines to be thinking about are August 1st for the state plan. We're hoping to get all the public comment finished up by July 18th so that we can develop the final draft of the plan and get it submitted early. And then September 30th, we'll have the decision from the FHWA if our plan is accepted or not. And the actual grant program will hopefully open up for applications at the beginning of next year. Sometime like Q1 or spring.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
all depends on all the guidance and decisions coming out of the joint office. So that's our goal. And also, we're hoping by the end of the week that we're going to have an interactive map that you all can participate in, where we will allow you all to tell us where you want to see chargers. It shows where the existing infrastructure is. So if you think that we need to have more chargers next to existing chargers, you can drop a pin on the map and share that information with us. And others can vote up or down if they like your suggestion. And that's going to be a real fun way to get public involvement in our plan. We ask that you get that, participate in that by the July 18th feedback deadline, but this tool will actually be open for the whole program, and you'll be able to go in at any time and we can update it and show you where some of the new chargers are going, and you can keep saying, sharing feedback on what you think we need to do as far as where chargers need to be hosted. So that should be published about Friday. So you go to the LADOTD website on Friday, there should be a link there for the My Social Pinpoint interactive map. So looking forward to that.
And then the last thing about this particular program that we'll mention before we kind of start closing out for the day is that the FHWA has published their proposed and minimum standards for this funding, which basically lays out a lot of technical standards, as well as some like metrics that states will be requiring for any installations or any projects funded under the program. So those were published just a few weeks ago. They're kind of really interesting. Some of them are very, very deep technical stuff. Some of it's kind of higher level stuff. But if anybody wants to read through those and submit a formal comment, comments are open until August 22nd. And there's a link on the Federal Register there. And once again, I'll drop the link in the chat in just a moment. But you can read the PDF version there. It's like 82 pages of technical goodness. It's great. But that exists and is open for public comment if anybody has any commentary about those technical specs.
Thank you. So we're about to wrap up here. I know we've thrown a lot of information at you, and we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, but we want to make sure you're aware of the rest of the sessions for this summit. So today at 2 p.m., we have our cabinet members, Tom Harris, who is Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources, Sean Wilson, who is Secretary of the DOTD, and Chuck Brown, who is the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Quality, each speaking about our state's goals, visions, their plans with their departments in order to advance clean transportation projects and reduce emissions in our state. So I think it's going to be fascinating. And our own Scott Barrios will be moderating this discussion between our 3 environmental state leaders and transportation leaders. So if you want to register for that, the main links for all of these sessions are on the Louisiana Clean Fuels website under meetings and events. And you'll see a listing of every session, and you can register for each one of those individually. So if you have not registered for these other sessions, that's where you can go. On day 2, that is tomorrow at 10 a.m. We're going to be talking to you again. You're going to see Tyler and I again, but this time we're going to have Callie with GNA joining us, and we're going to be talking about funding your clean fuel projects. We're going to go in a little more detail about some of the available funding out there. We're going to talk about partnering and strategies, really give you the lowdown. It's similar to a session that we did in the past, but there's just so much more information now on the new funding opportunities that we wanted to make sure we did an update and shared that with you. So please register for that session. Then at 12:30, we have clean transportation solutions for ports. Now, you don't have to work at a port, run a port to be interested in this session. They've got a lot of really good strategies and information that you can glean from this, but our presenters are going to be Matt Meyer with Danar with their super cool equipment. We got Richie with Entergy, and he is a shore power and electrification project manager at Entergy. And we have a new speaker, Mary Till with Sawatch, who's going to be talking about how you can use your data to make your transportation choices about fleet electrification, total cost of ownership, and really, really understand what is going to work best for you. So she's going to kick it off, and then Tyler Herman is going to be moderating and keeping it all together and keeping everyone on track tomorrow. So this is going to be a really interesting session. Also, we have, to wrap up the whole week, or the Clean Fuels Summit, we have building a resilient transportation system. So Terry Chambers, who is the Director of Energy Efficiency and Sustainability, at University of Louisiana Lafayette is going to be our moderator. They've got a lot of really great programs and research and grants that they've won. I think you'll find some of their projects fascinating. He's going to moderate the panel. We have Rachel Shard with lead project manager of buses at CalSTART. Is going to be talking about bidirectional charging and a lot of other sustainability and resilience efforts that CalSTART is embarking on. Great information for you all. And Renee Sampson, Director of Regulatory Affairs West at FreeWire. They have a really innovative vehicle charging solution that utilizes batteries and reduces the drain on the grid. All of these together, really great conversation. We encourage you to join up for that one as well. And last of all, we have our announcements. The Clean Fuel Summit will be in person in Baton Rouge, April 18th to the 20th. We encourage you all to pencil that in. It's going to be a great event with a vehicle expo. We're going to have breakout sessions, a reception on the 18th. And you know, we're really good at our in-person events. We know how to entertain you, feed you, and educate you. So we encourage you to join us. And for our third Clean Fuels Golf Classic, is going to be this first day that session opens, that it will be April 10th of 2023 at University Club. So we're excited about that one. And our first golf tournament was March 13th of 2020. You know what that day is. That was like the last day of freedom any of us had before quarantine and shutdown. So we have had an exciting road with this golf tournament, but it has been a great success every year, and we're really excited to have it again. So we're going to move into the Q&A. So if you all have any questions for us, please put them in the Q&A section. But I do see we had one question, a couple of questions and comments in the chat.
Yes, so Gordon asked, with the various strides made in the use of alternative fuels discussed earlier, CNG, electric, renewable diesel, etc., is there one that is rising to the top as the preferred option? Is the DOE or state expressing a preference for one over the other, given the need for infrastructure to encourage widespread use? I'm happy to take a first stab at that if nobody else wants to jump at it.
Sure.
I think that, you know, the market's kind of doing what the market's going to do, and that is kind of coalesced in the different sectors. So like passenger cars kind of seem like they're obviously going towards electrification because the infrastructure burden for like CNG is much harder for those. At least that's what seems to be the case. But generally, from a Clean Cities perspective, whenever we are working with any fleets or any government entities, we definitely have a very all of the above, what works best in the given situation approach to things. And that's all based on what the needs of the user are. If the pure goal is greenhouse gas emissions reductions, we're probably going to have a kind of a multi-pronged approach to get stuff on the road as quickly as possible. A mix of biofuels, electrification, propane, whatever it happens to be, to get that stuff on the road as quickly as possible. But it's all based really on what the needs and the abilities of that particular fleet or user are, because that changes the equation very dramatically. All the different fuels have different benefits and different considerations associated with them, or infrastructure needs or mechanic training needs. And we really just try to figure out which one's going to work the best in that situation so that it works well and we can get it on the road today versus 10 years from now if you wait for the infrastructure to get up. So I think that from our perspective, it's really an all of the above, what works best in that situation approach. And what 20 years looks like down the line, I wouldn't even bother trying to answer that question in particular. But I think from our perspective, that's what it is. It's just kind of everything.
Yeah, I know the DOE and the Joint Office of the DOE and the transportation, the federal departments are interested in focusing more on greenhouse gas reductions in general than they have before. But the state of Louisiana is very interested in total cost of ownership and emissions reductions in general. So we're looking at an all the above. It just depends on the individual goals, the duty cycles, what kind of vehicles you need, what's going to work best, what's available. And, it has to be cost effective. If we're using public money to convert these fleets over, it's going to have to be cost effective and sustainable over time, as far as financially sustainable and environmentally sustainable. So you will see an all the above approach, just like Tyler mentioned, especially for the state of Louisiana. And Let me see. And Anthony Odak, one of our stakeholders with Stone Oil, is that they're in the midst of negotiating biodiesel storage at their Gretna terminal with REG. Expectations is completion with bulk wholesale biodiesel availability late in the third quarter of 2022. Thank you, Anthony. We are very excited to see that, and we'd love to talk to you more about that. And if you look at some of our past Clean Fuel Leader Awards, Stone Oil was one of our major winners in the past for their emissions reductions with their shore power projects. So we're happy to have you here today, Tony. Do we have any more questions?
We have
Good.
kind of a comment more or less in the Q&A section. That is about the different obstacles associated with installing charging stations and how that can be basically addressed. So it's got 5 different points there that we'll definitely make sure to pass around. But a few of them I think we can probably address to some degree here. So one of them is about the availability of transformers being potentially a year or 2 out for delivery. That's definitely a problem that may impact the funding that we're seeing coming down the line. And I think a lot of that is that the interested applicants are going to be calling out for those or ordering those transformers and that kind of equipment earlier rather than later to get them actually in transit there. I see Scott turn his video on, so I think he's probably going to comment on a little bit of this here.
Yes.
I think that people are being proactive about that to partially address that issue. And then with the NEVI funds in particular, I think that's probably what this is directed at. We're probably 2 years out from, or maybe a year and a half out from any funds actually going out to anybody. So there is time for these to be sort of addressed by the market, people getting in ahead of the problem. And then in terms of the other thing that I'll just touch on directly before passing it off, the point of Louisiana being in a flood hazard area, or at least much of the state. Absolutely, that is specifically called out in the proposed minimum standards by the FHWA that I talked about a little bit earlier as a high concern that is written into our state plan, the geographic concerns and flood hazard concerns and resiliency. That is written into that. And again, I very much welcome, or we need public comment, I should say, on that to make sure that that's as robust as possible, because those things are going to be taken into account and they need to be. So those are all very salient concerns that people are looking at, and we'd love formal comment on.
Yeah, to add on it, Tyler, great questions from Mark, and it's something we hear a lot about. I am the manager of business development for Entergy in our innovation lab. So this is something that we look at on a daily basis. Specifically on the first question on how electrical co-ops are supported in this, it's through partnerships with entities such as Louisiana Clean Fuels, Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership. Our investor-owned utilities in the state, Entergy, CLECO, SWEPCO, are all at the table engaging with Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, engaging across various stakeholders to talk about this. But our co-ops, we need to get them to the table more through their, trade advocacy groups as well to get them thinking about this. We have a lot of co-ops in the state and a lot of different ways they operate as well too. Municipal utilities as well. I know Lafayette Utility Services, for example, as a municipal utility in the state, engaging with them as well too on specifically on the transformer availability. Now, from a grid readiness standpoint, I would say it's more on the line of 750 kVA transformers are going to be required to meet the NEVI guidelines. That is something that we're looking at and working with, again, with our stakeholders, understand what is going to be the need for these, where do we have available 3-phase power to meet some of these high demand areas where potentially NEVI compliant fast charging stations will go, and looking at what's going to be the supply chain need for up to 2030 750 kVA transformers out as well too, to support this growth. Now you're right, we're looking anywhere 9 to 12 months on supply chain needs right now, and that could go. We don't see that changing in the foreseeable future, but we can, as long as we know, utilities are good at planning for infrastructure. As long as we know where it's going, we can plan for that infrastructure and get the supply, get the transformers, resources that we need to line up. But that's also in line with what we're hearing out from a lot of fast charging availability right now in general. Transformers, I don't think, are the critical path in building out stations. Just getting the hardware for the fast chargers in general you're also talking about a year plus lead time for that hardware. Now looking at how are utilities working, making it more stable, looking at the varying demand. We monitor closely what electric vehicle growth and projecting out even 40 to 50 years, what that growth looks like in the state as well too, and what it's going to do to the grid. We're doing various studies across even our company and with consultants looking at load growth specifically in the residential and fleet area is where we identify as potential with having major impacts on the grid, in the long term, not in the short term. But part of this is if we know if infrastructure load is coming, we can prepare for that. As far as looking at ways to, control charging times, now that can, general end utilities have different mechanisms to do that, whether it's through some type of rate design, whether a demand adjuster or time of use rates, time of day rates. Utilities have those tools at their disposal to kind of help incentivize on and off peak charging times, depending on where the need is as well too. It's something a lot of utilities have used and are looking at in the future as well as there's virtual time of use rates, whether it's through some type of monitoring through an advanced meter infrastructure or telematics in the car to also incentivize people to charge their vehicles, whether it's for commercial use or for private use on those off-peak times. So there's a lot of tools utilities have that they'll be working with. So hopefully those answers your questions, Mark, and happy to be a resource for the team going forward.
Yes, thank you, Scott. And one thing that we want to mention is that the DOTD, Louisiana Clean Fuels, and all the other partners under this NEVI plan as part of the EV committee, we're having these conversations with utilities, we're having meetings with stakeholders, we're getting feedback from EVSE suppliers, supply companies, organizations like the oil marketers and others, and the Motor Transport Association. So we're having these discussions and trying to answer these very difficult questions. And again, we urge you to look at those minimum standards documents and give your feedback to the federal government, not to us, on the minimum standards, and to take a look at our draft plan and share your feedback with the DOTD on our draft plan. In fact, we are meeting with the co-ops in July. So the DOTD will be meeting with the co-ops in July to get their feedback, share information, and help prepare them. And when you look at our state plan, you'll see the approximate locations of the base stations that we need. And most of those, they fall within a utility district of one of the main utilities like, SWEPCO, Entergy, CLECO, who are all very much aware and capable of handling these projects. And it's only until we get into the third, fourth, and fifth year of funding that we're really going to be getting into some of these more underserved areas and eventually going off corridor that the participation of the munis and the co-ops are really going to be needed to start really filling out that infrastructure. So again, if you have a question, please enter it into the chat or the Q&A. I saw someone had a raised hand. Please put your question into the Q&A before we wrap up. All right. Now, again, Louisiana Clean Fuels and the Southeast Louisiana Clean Fuel Partnership welcome you to this initial kickoff of our Clean Fuels Summit. We are not really fuel agnostic, but we're solutions based. So we are here to help you with whatever solution helps you get to your goals. You are the boss when you're the fleet. You tell us what you want, you tell us what the goals are, and we're going to present you with the technology and the tools that'll help you get there. And we look forward to working with you all and hope you enjoy the rest of this Clean Fuels Summit. Thank you so much for attending today. And again, we look forward to seeing you next time. And this concludes the webinar.
Thank you all.